Design Deconstructed. I'm Matthew Medina. I'm an advanced narrative designer at ArenaNet, and today we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 8 of End of Dragons, which is titled Fallout. Fallout was a really cool and interesting chapter in that we were trying to do something a little different by having a more horror or sort of spooky or creepy vibe to a big part of it, which is something that we have done before but not a lot of in our game. We've had a few key moments here and there throughout Golden Path story in the previous expansions or Living World seasons, but I don't think we've ever done something quite as far-reaching as this, and also it was a lot of fun to come up with different types of sort of like creepy and horror effects, and make sure that we could cover the kind of territory that we wanted to cover in terms of the lore, because there is a significant chunk of reveals in this chapter about elder dragons, about dragons in general, about the relationship that we have to the Void, which is our first introduction to this new force that has emerged from the broken dragon cycle. So there was a lot of ground to cover in this chapter, and there was some fun bits too. There's a small pocket instance that not even pocket instance, just a small instance at the start of it where we get to have some fun meeting with Navan and Rama and do some things there that also we haven't done before, which included sitting down at a table to eat food. So that's always fun to try to innovate and do different things that we've never done in our game before. So yeah, there's a lot to cover, and so I will just head on into the game, and I hope that you get to enjoy what you see when I talk about Chapter 8, Fallout. So without further ado, let's hop into game. Okay, let's get into New Cunning City. We're going to pick up again in Chapter 8, Fallout. To read the mail. See, do I have the waypoint? I believe I do. Yes. Yeah, so we're headed to Nika's Blade.
A dragon.
Could you provide any details, ma'am?
No, I can't. It was
These little
away.
mini vignettes are. There's a couple of these around the restaurant because we wanted to have a little bit of this flavor. Kind of just reinforcing the story.
Heard there was some kind of trouble over at the reactor.
You see that streak in the sky right before the power flickered?
No, I was in the bakery watching my oven.
Just little basic stuff.
Yeah.
More world building.
My hollow projector's toast.
Alright. Funny thing, you may have seen that load screen for the longest time had a horse on it. But as is commonly known, there are no horses in Guild Wars 2. So we had them paint that out.
This situation is diplomatically sensitive.
The Empress would prefer that no one behave rashly. Ah, Commander, you arrived. Let's take a seat. This is my favorite sushi in Yukaineng. I would make a recommendation, but everything is good.
You honor us, esteemed Navan. What would you like today?
I'll have the yellowtail and the triple temaki, please.
I'll take a bowl of white rice.
You don't care for sushi, detective?
Don't eat anything that looks like it should
Yeah,
stay
so
moving.
this is a fun
I
little
see.
moment.
And for you.
I can't remember what inspired me to do this. We had been talking about what we wanted to do because we needed to meet Rama and Navan and have this moment and eventual confrontation with Captain Fa from Junlai Jade Security. And so we always knew sort of like roughly what was going to happen from the Golden Path part, but I don't remember exactly what prompted me to say, well, why don't we have it at a sushi restaurant where players can actually get a menu and sit down and order a food item, which I don't think is something we've ever done in Guild Wars 2. So I thought, why not, right? So we came up with a menu. You can order. You can say you're not hungry if you want. There's also the chef's special, which is quite a lot of fun if you choose the combat route. There's a player choice here, which I'm going to spoil a little bit, where when Captain Fa approaches, you have the choice of challenging him to a fight, which is a straightforward combat encounter, or you can try to talk him down, and then there is a sort of mini game of diplomacy where you have to try to tell him, you have to try to convince him, because he is a man of reason, and so you have to try to convince him that you are innocent, that you, or at least at the very least, that he shouldn't take you in without more evidence. But the reason I brought it up is that Chef Special has an influence on one of those options. We talked about making it so that the Chef Special would have some deleterious effects regardless of which path you chose, but it was a little too complicated, and we didn't get that in time. So anyway, I'm not going to show that here. Basically, it turns you into bobblehead mode, which makes the fight kind of comical, because Detective Rama with his hat is pretty funny to see when he's in the bobblehead mode. So I would encourage you to try that yourself. Anyway, I'm going to get a skipjack roll. Each of these things does bring out a different food item. We didn't have
Detective,
those
I
exact
understand
things,
how
so I
this
tried
all
to get it
looks.
as close as I could.
In fact, terrorism follows you around like a bad smell.
But each one
It's
does have a
because we've
different
been on the
look.
trail of a terrorist, an Aetherblade named Unka. She ordered the Aetherblade attacks, and she released Suwan.
But I also just love the idea that, we're sitting
Any
at
at
a
all.
table with
Look, I know
NPCs, which
you
is
have
also
a
something I
file
don't think we've ever
You probably
really done.
already understand me better than I do.
NPCs are often,
So what sounds
walking
more
and
like
talking, and
that I
they
put
rarely are
millions of
just
lives
sitting
in
around
danger,
and
or
having
that
a
I am
conversation.
the person who did.
Let's hear what Navan has to say.
Thank you. Now, everyone, if we could...
Commander, I'm afraid I need to ask you to come with me.
It took some doing to make
we're in
these
the process of
guys
negotiating a civil resolution.
walk and
Publicist
surround him in the way that I wanted.
Esteemed Navan, but Lady
Again,
Julie
our
wants to see you
follow
this personally.
actions are not
Detective?
the most
Can you tell your colleague to stand down?
versatile.
My colleague, he's a
So
dressed-up
these
rent-a-cop.
these mechs are all
Back to
hand
Junai,
scripted
Captain Fa. The real police are on the case.
with parameterized
Detective, the
locations,
event
so
in
they all
question
stand
took place
in
on
a nice
Junai
formation.
property, and under the autonomy resolution, a corporate entity may claim jurisdiction to whatever.
If the resolution is in the primary interest of the corporate entity.
Captain, I need to remain free to pursue the Elder Dragon your corporate entity was keeping under Kaineng.
Captain Fa
Junai
is
Jade
one of
is
my
not
favorite
now, nor have
of
we
our new
ever
characters.
been in possession of some
Thousands of people saw a dragon emerge
I
from the
got,
water near your facility.
Please.
Please,
Our
listen to what the
character
commander has to
artists
say.
provided us with this amazing
well.
hairstyle.
What do you know? A string from a corporate
You're walking
stooge.
away while I'm trying to show you your hair, which has white around the temples. I mean, I'm getting up there in age, and so I wanted to see a little bit of representation of older man in our game, in our expansion. So I asked if they could do that for us, and we took a couple different iterations, but I think we were really happy with how he ended up turning out. So anyway, you can talk to Rama and Navan here, and they offer you advice on what you should do. Captain Fa also is without knowing. I mean, he basically says, "Look, I'll give you a little bit of time, but you know he's on a clock. So if you do,
short, Commander, you asked to
as
speak
you
with
see,
me, so speak.
if you do delay your response to him, he will eventually get tired and challenge you to a fight, regardless of what you choose. So I'm gonna try to talk him out. Let's see if I remember the sequence." Okay, so yeah, you have to start with reason, because that was a clue in the earlier thing where I think Navan has a thing where she's like, yeah, he is a man of reason. I didn't actually click on her to find that out. Another thing that was interesting about this is we got our amazing UI artists to also provide custom portrait art for this, and basically his attitude. I mean, we don't unfortunately have the ability to do some of this in game, so we wanted to show his attitude towards the player in this portrait window, and so he's all upset still at this point. And you can choose 3 of these options. They're based on the old personality system, which no longer works, but we sometimes still use it for flavor things like this, where you know, each of these represents sort of a different approach that you can take. So, you know, you can challenge him here. Blindly following the orders is a hallmark of tyranny, which, you know, given his current attitude, you can expect he probably wouldn't respond too well to that. So, you know, this is an attempt to put in a little bit of a nice little player driven conversation thing, like other games have done. We don't do this very often, but I really wanted to kind of capture the sense of you being able to convince somebody of your side. So here you're trying to like de-escalate the situation, so you know you kind of want to start with something that like gives a little bit of ground, right, and that softens his attitude just a little bit. And so now he's still not happy with you, but he's not like fuming mad, right? So that's kind of the nice thing about doing this. And if you say something negative, he'll go back to being pissed off, and then you basically another try at this. And if you get him, it's sort of a escalation de-escalation, and if you get him escalated up high enough, he'll automatically fight you. And so the goal is to like try to bring him down little by little, which is a tactic, de-escalation tactic. So here we want to use logic. Do you have any footage of me at the scene? And he has to admit, no, it was lost somehow. Lady June insists you were the only one there. She was quite upset about it. You know, you can kind of try empathy again, but he and Lady June are not the most empathetic people. if you have paid any attention to their characters, so that's not going to work here. Dispute, but if you have no proof of my guilt, it's wrong to detain me. Or aha, even you admitted that I made a good point. Case closed, which is just arrogant, right? Like he's not going to respond to arrogance. So you know, he is for all his bluster. Like Captain Fa is a by the book. You know, I always saw him as he was probably a former cop, right? Like Rama, in his younger days, and then went into private security. And so like even though private security, you know, kind of operates under their own rules, he is still a man of the law, right? Like he believes in law and order. He believes in justice, and you know, so you could say, look, if you don't have any proof of my guilt, it's wrong to detain me, which is absolutely true. And so he would respond to that of like, yeah, I get it, right? But he would still challenge, right? You denying that you were in the power plant. There are 100 witnesses. Power plant was in ruins. How do you explain that? Like, he's saying, you know, there's no evidence, but all the circumstantial evidence points to your guilt. So, okay. I love this one. I put this one in here. I don't have the burden of proof. That falls to the accuser, which is absolutely true. That is a nice point of logic. But again, or no, sorry, that is actually the right answer here. Isn't it? No. That's right. So the rational response here seems like the right way to go, but he's trying to remember why that wasn't the one we went with here. Honesty is the better choice here, because admitting that you were there will win points with him. I think rational, we talked about this, that maybe rational would also get you de-escalated. But I think the reason we came to that conclusion is that even though he is a rational person, in this moment, you know, the honesty is the better argument that he believes. So, and then here, you know, humility ends up being the solution, because, you know, you've basically thrown yourself at his mercy and said, look, I presented my case. I think it's solid, and
Lady June
voila.
won't be so easily mollified. You'd better find your terrorists, and soon.
I also love this wonderful picture of a happy Captain Fa. It might be a little much. Like, I can't, you know, we got this back, and I was sort of like, would Captain Fa ever be that happy? I don't know. Like, he doesn't strike me as the type who would smile too much. But I loved it enough that I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave it in. It's fine. It's fun. So yeah, this is a fairly small instance. There's not a lot to it. So we just have to talk to Navan and
You said you have a plan, Navan?
close off this instance,
yes.
and we'll head back out.
First, where do you stand, Detective? Do you still insist on taking the commander in?
No. I've seen and heard enough to convince me the commander's got a job to do. But I'm coming along. If things are as bad as you say they are, well, you need me. If they're not,
That's right, Mama.
then
We
I
all
get any
need you.
sense I'm being played.
You're not.
I borrowed something from the Ministry of Intelligence for you, Commander. It will disguise your face, but nothing else.
Intel gets all the best toys.
I know somewhere you can use as a base of operations.
So here's an interesting little
It's just
thing.
east of here, in
So
the
we
Echovolt
got
Forest.
this.
The detective and I will go
We
first
had a lot of back
to
and
clear
forth about
any
this
potential roadblocks.
tech, this Jade Tech
You,
hollow
Commander,
scrambler.
will meet us at the city gates.
We know, you know, we didn't want to put the player in a position where once they left this instance, so we convinced Captain Fa to leave us alone, right? And he leaves. But neither he nor Minsek would necessarily just want to let us go. Like, we're still kind of a person of interest. And so while Captain Fa is not going to actively pursue us because we convinced him otherwise, you know, we sort of ran into this weird situation where wouldn't the commander still be, like, wanted, or at least for questioning, right? Like, wouldn't Minsek kind of have you on their radar? And so we decided we needed to have some kind of, like, way to sort of hand wave the fact that, you know, players are running around the open world and they're not being questioned or taken in by Minsek. So we came up with this idea, right, of, well, we've done this before where you're disguised. So in this case, you get a hollow scrambler, which is Jade Tech. And we had some really interesting discussions about whether or not this... Actually, I'm just going to hop out of the instance while this is going on. Forgive me talking over the dialogue that results. But
we need to talk.
this hollow scrambler was something where in previous instances where we did a disguise like this, it was very visible. And we have gotten quite a bit of feedback from players that they don't like to have their character, who they spend a lot of time, you know, making look pretty, and, you know, Fashion Wars is definitely a thing in our game.
There was
So,
some evidence of an aether blade present.
we did not
but no
have
Tarantula herself.
And Aureen's brand is still
that
spreading.
reflected
Every
in
repair
this
I just met with
disguise.
Lavon.
The
She has
disguise
help.
is just basically this icon,
Which means the
and when you
Empress is
enter a map,
probably
you
on
see
our
a bit of
side.
a, like, you know,
Exactly.
hollow
Lavana's taking me to a sanctuary in the
energy
Epival
effect
Forest,
around you,
somewhere we can plan our next
to
move.
show that, you know,
Detective Ramos
something
showed his
is
impressive
being
badge
applied
with
to
us
you.
as well.
But we didn't want to show it all the
Meet
time
me in
because it
Epival.
was,
Kaz, Timmy, keep
you
doing
know,
what you're
trying
doing.
to preserve as much as we could player's appearance. So they didn't have that, you know, fight over, like, well, I made my character look exactly how I want to look, and now you're putting a disguise on me, and I'm ugly. You know, or I'm just this big flashy ball of, you know, glowing effects or whatever. You know, which is how it ended up looking in previous content where we did something like that. It was we did this in Path of Fire where you were disguised as the Archon, and you know, you had this constant sort of like mesmer shimmer from Casimir on you all the time, and we just got feedback that wasn't really super great. So we decided to do it differently this time. I'm not sure that it's better or worse. Like, I'm the type of player that I would probably prefer to see some sort of glow or shimmer around my character, so that, or like if you look at your character, like maybe their face is all like pixelated. I don't know. Like, I thought that would have been kind of funny, but it is what it is. All right. So now we get to go into Arborstone for the first time, which is a hugely fun map to work in. Justin Fawcett, the map artist, is always such a joy. He does these amazingly beautiful. I mean, just look at this view, man. It's breathtaking. So I knew. In fact, you'll see. Once I got in this map and I saw this view, I was like, well, that calls for a in-game fly-through, which we don't always do anymore. But we did one at the beginning of Kaineng. This is a more traditional Vista style fly-through where, you know, I take full control over the camera and I, you know, put subtitles on,
used to tell me stories.
you know, because I wanted this to feel a lot more cinematic than other
They built this place. It was one of the great houses of the Kurziks.
other
For
types of
centuries.
cinematics. You know,
Until
we
it
have a
was
lot of
abandoned
tools in
when
our
they were
toolbox for
conquered by
doing
the
this sort of
Ministry of
stuff.
Purity.
So
Due respect, ma'am, but safe haven? This place isn't exactly subtle.
No. But its occupants are no friends of the Canthan authorities. You'll be safe here. Come. See.
this is one of those things too where, like, we had to do a lot to, because this is a giant map, and as you, if you've played the game at all, you know that the
What?
it becomes something that you turn into a hub for yourself. Well, not just for yourself, but a hub where you can sort of unlock different not layers. Well, I guess layers is correct. Layers and levels of content. But at this stage, it is still very much just, you know, a ruin in the wilds of Echovald. And so, you know, we put other things like, you know, vine walls up around all the entrances. The only way in is through this. You know, and that's just another little thing of, like, just selling that this place starts from one point and then over time becomes more open, and then you can develop it, you know, just to give that sense of progression of the space. So that it's always fun to do stuff like that. And I don't know how much of that stuff registers or is super visible. We don't do a lot to call attention to it. But yeah, it's super fun. This is our first encounter with, well, a first encounter in the Golden Path story of the Void. But we don't know that they're called the Void at this point, so we just named them Shadowy Creature because that's, you know, what they would assume that they are. And they are all, you know, they are all basically versions of the Elder Dragon minions that we've seen in the past, but all sort of grouped up together into one giant army. And they all have this amazing visual effect on them that our incredible art team that does our visual effects. Lee Bledsoe is the lead for that team, but Nate and all the other artists. Sorry, I don't remember everyone's name off the top of my head. We have many people at the studio who do amazing work, but it's hard to keep everybody straight sometimes. But yeah, they did an incredible job of making these shaders work so that they look like, you know, this sort of like oil slick kind of vibe to them. That's, you know, not liquid but magical, you know, sort of like a magical oil slick. It's an amazing effect. I also have to give them huge kudos because I know for a fact that it was not easy to apply that effect to every one of our dragon minions, because they also had their own shaders and their own effects, and some of them, like these branded creatures, they, you know, it kind of conflicted with the shaders that they had for the branding effect, so they had to do a couple different passes before they settled on this. I wanted to make this encounter feel a little more dangerous to sort of set up the threat of the Void before we got into the space where it's a little bit more quiet and eerie. So, you know, it's a bit of a misdirect in that, you know, you think, okay, these things are dangerous, and they're, you know, they're obviously hostile. And you know, we get to see creatures that we haven't seen fight together, and it's really awesome that we were able to get all these creatures together into a single army.
Wardrobe and Branded all fighting together.
I thought so too, but on closer inspection, they appeared to be constructs of some kind, made up of an unidentified magic, not the same one we found in the reactor.
Perhaps we should move this discussion into the warded.
This was a lot of fun to set up these wards.
No,
We have,
that's not
you know, we
necessary.
have gotten a lot of new tech over the years, and one of the things that we have are these sort of like repulsive forces, which we call wind tech. Even though they're not necessarily wind, they can
But shouldn't hers be water?
you know, they can react like wind, or in this case they can react like, you know, bubbles of, you know, just force that prevent you from going anywhere until they get disabled. And so Nirvana is unlocking these wards that she set and
Does
then
it always
putting them back,
this way?
you know, when
No,
she
not at all.
passes
I
through, so
don't know
that,
what
you
might
know,
happen.
hopefully it
I
keeps
left
out
the
any of the
Guardian
bad
in
stuff that's out on the
charge.
outside.
Ishan,
Awfully quiet. Was it just Ishan?
no. We should be hearing laughter and song.
Also get a
cracking
give another
fires.
shout out to
large
Justin
group
Fawcett
Was
and
being the operative word.
I think
If there's
Megan,
anyone here,
one of our
we'll
other map
find them.
artists. They worked together on really getting the look and feel down for this this sort of void atmosphere that is here. You see it here, but then you also see it a lot in the last map in the Jade Sea. Basically, anytime there's a large presence of void in the area, as there is here, and we will find out in a minute what is causing that. You know, you have these sort of dark energy crystals, and they're all flowing up, defying gravity. You know, we really wanted to make the void into something really spooky and creepy. I want to give a shout out here to Morgan Lockhart, one of our writers, who was paired with me for this chapter. in this instance. We really wanted to like amp up sort of like the horror factor, and she did this masterfully. She and I brainstormed up things we could do. We wanted it to feel like the void is sort of like messing with reality, and so we had all these little vignettes that you can go around and
What
find.
happened here? They look like they were in the middle of unpacking.
His chest is hollow. All the internal organs are gone.
But there's no visible wounds. Where the hell did they go?
Well, don't look at me. You're the death expert.
I love that line. We actually used to have a follow-up line from Jory here where she said something like, what makes you think I'm the death expert? And she's like, and Rama's like, well, I don't know, maybe the skulls on your belt. But that it was sort of like, that was a little obvious and on the nose. Yeah, setting these up was kind of fun. We did a fun thing here too, or interesting thing where initially we had some feedback that finding these things was kind of hard, because I basically, I just put this giant green circle to tell you, hey, search this area. But I mean, that's not a small area search, right? So like, as you see, now there's a couple stars here, and what the reason for that is the longer players take to search, every X amount of time, and I don't remember exactly what the timing is, but there's a timer running in the background, and every X seconds that go by, if you haven't discovered the next clue yet, it will put it on there for you. So it's a little bit of a hint guide,
Faces are blue.
a little bit of a helper
Do
for
they all
players
choke?
who are
No.
taking some time.
Take a closer look at the cheeks and lips. Swollen.
I thought it was pretty clear, but
Yeah,
this is one of those downsides of like when you're a designer and you're working on your content, you're like, well, this is obvious. Of course, it's going to be super
The
easy
only
to
way
find.
know for sure would be to
Yeah,
test
because
the
I
food.
know where everything is, right? Like, so yeah, it's hard for me. It's easy for me to say,
I dabble as a hobby.
and not
I
so
enjoy reading about
easy
unsolved crimes
to
and
see
seeing
other
if I can
people's
solve
point of
them.
view that yeah, maybe it's actually harder than I anticipated making it. Also love this little nod to Gorik's. The first hint we get that Gorik is super interested in forensics. He's not just an expert on dragons and bugs. He's apparently super into forensics. Another thing that we did, Morgan and I talked, we wanted to come up with some really weird stuff to do here to show that like things. Oh, that's weird. The void effect is not on this. There should be a void effect on this target. So pretend that there is. I might have to look into that. It's a visual bug. But, it says this seems to be in some sort of temporal flux. It's unsure which position in time and space to occupy. It's just basically falling over by itself. It's just kind of basic stuff. Really easy to set up, really easy to kind of implement, but hopefully it gives you a lot of really interesting sort of weird dynamics. So we have things like this where this book is talking to you, like I don't know, like it's like it's reading your thoughts and then basically showing it back to you. Although there's some interesting, we had some discussions about whether this was the player, where this voice in this book is the commander, or if it's the author who wrote this down. I always sort of thought of it as this is the commander, and their thoughts just happened to end up in this journal. Like the journal was blank until the commander picked it up, and then all their thoughts kind of like stream of consciousness dumped out onto the page. If we had animating text, that would have been much clearer, but we don't. So it is what it is. So yeah, it's a strange journal there that is haunted. I don't know. So we put a few of those around. I don't know that I'll go and find all of them for you. If you're interested, I'm sure you can find them on our wiki. Somebody's probably put up a guide for the achievements.
Died in their sleep.
Smoldering embers in the brazier.
Puts the time of death sometime in the last few hours.
There's also another one of those tricky ones where because the player is open to exploring they can go anywhere and in any order, so we had to account for like finding the clues in whatever order you found them in, which was tricky because sometimes they, you know, the NPCs that follow you would be out of place, and so along these lines, I have when you interact, they move into a position and then go back to following you. And if you leave while the dialogue is going on, it will stop and they'll return to following you. And there's all kinds of like shenanigans around there. Journal from one of the Tengu that was not living, but like taking refuge here. This is one of my favorite little bits. It's got a nice little moment with Gorik.
No, that isn't possible.
Ike Amade, the voice actor for Gorik, is one of our favorites.
What villain would disrespect the laws of physics like
and
this?
And he really nailed this scene.
That's the thing you're hung up on here?
Look, the universe has rules. Break those rules and nothing, I mean nothing, makes sense. Nothing can be trusted. Down is up is down, water is dry. Am I still Gorik?
You are definitely still Gorik.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun trying to come up with an effect that would, you know, look like what Gorik describes as the square root of -1, and so it's a combination of this sort of like distortion effect around a void pocket, but then also if you notice, and this is kind of hard to see because our lighting system sometimes is a little bit weird, but there's a negative light here, which is getting obliterated by the sunlight, but yeah, it's kind of a neat, like, you know, it's like an anti-light. So yeah, we have fun making stuff like that. All right, so now at this point, all of the clues should be revealed because I've been taking my sweet time and talking.
Where is Ishan? He was supposed to be protecting these people.
Seems there was a dereliction of duties.
Or he was first to go.
And we have a floating corpse here, which is always nice. Oh, this corrupted book was another where we, I actually did this interesting test with this at first, where instead of this sort of like mishmash of words, where it starts out talking about something, and this is actually pulled from, there was something in the Factions Guidebook that I basically took the text from, and I put it into ran it through a filter, basically, that transposed words and pulled in random gibberish, and it spit out this kind of like really weird thing. The first thing we tried to do with this, actually, though, was I found a website where you could put in a block of text, and it would flip it and reverse it and spit it out in a font that was basically like backwards. So it looks like you were looking at it through a mirror. That was what I originally wanted to do with this, but I showed it to editing, and they said, well, we don't really have a problem with it, but you're going to have to convince localization. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. We ship in however many languages we ship, and they're never going to agree to that. So we ended up doing that instead, so that, and even there, like, we had to talk to localization, because whenever you do sort of gibberish text, you have to make it clear to them that, by the way, this is not supposed to make sense, because localization doesn't necessarily know that. They're not designing the content with us. They're basically just getting blocks of text, and it's up to them, you know, they have to sometimes reach out to us to get additional context. But that one had no additional context, because it was literally just, I don't know,
Poor bastards.
we just made up words and strung them together into something that sounded like it once was, you know,
Should we investigate?
Yes, but keep your
sensical.
eyes and ears open. We're not alone here.
Yes, so we're going to meet Ishan. One thing I will say, we thought that this was going to be like super obvious because he's like this giant sinewy sort of black void dragon. But I don't know that I've ever seen anybody see him before this moment takes place.
A salt spray dragon. But it's like those creatures outside. A shade.
All right. So this this combat encounter was done in close collaboration with Ben Arnold. Ben Arnold is one of our content programmers, one of our more gifted engineers. Always super helpful whenever we have super technical problems. But he's also a really, really strong encounters designer. He's able to put things together quickly, and so I did one of the attacks, which is the acid breath that he lays on the ground, and Ben Arnold did all the other skills for this dragon, because this dragon shows up outside of this instance as well, or not specifically Ishan as he is here, but other salt spray dragons, say that 10 times fast. You know, they're in the Jade Sea meta. There are a couple spots where they show up. So all of Ishan's attacks share the same skills with those creatures, but he has the unique sort of conical acid breath attack. That's his signature move. I don't do a lot of encounters design because I am not as well versed with our skill system as many other designers. I've taken my focus in other directions, and so I know how to make skills, but a lot of times the way that I do skills is copy and paste things that I find on other creatures and be like, yeah, I want this, and then I'll tweak variables and change effects and do other things. But encounters design is such a amazing skill set, and like I think to do them well, you really got to focus on it, and I think that's true of narrative design as well. And so like I've chosen to focus more on the narrative side, and I leave the sort of the hardcore encounters design to other players. So in fact, case in point, that acid breath attack is basically, if you are familiar with Heart of Thorns, the wyvern or wyvern. I never know how to pronounce that. Wyvern, who knows? Those winged creatures had a fire breath attack. That's basically the same attack that I used. So I copied the wyvern's fire breath attack, replaced the effect with acid breath. Did some tweaks to the numbers so that it wasn't quite as deadly, didn't last as long. I mean, that's because, I don't know. My theory on that is why reinvent the wheel, right? Like if somebody did something that works, and all you need is some tweaks to it, why not, right? The original design for this fight had a bit more complexity to it, but we ended up kind of simplifying it just because this is the first time we're meeting a Salt Spray Dragon in the Golden Path again. And anytime we do something as a first time encounter, we try to, not make it super easy, but we try to make it less complicated so that you get familiar with its attacks, you understand what you need to do in a slightly less high pressure way. So yeah. But my original design had called for it to, so you can see it's doing this like quadrant thing where it moves to one side of the arena and then picks a random point, or random wedge rather, of that arena, and then spits the acid breath that is a slimmed down version of what I wanted it to do initially on paper design, which was he was going to pick it up. He was going to do wedge, wedge, wedge. And then in the final phase, he was going to do all the wedges, so you would have very, very little room to maneuver. But again, you know, story content we try to make on the easier side anyway, and so in the end, it just felt like, no, let's stick with something that is more clear cut. You know, if you learn how to dodge the one breath attack, that's all you really need to do in this fight. I'm sure there are other designers or other players who would prefer something a little bit harder. But I mean, we definitely have those too. Like, I think the Anka fight, which is coming up in a couple chapters, is much more in line with sort of our hard version of a story boss fight. So, you know, I thought it's good to have a variety. I didn't want every boss fight in our story to be of equal difficulty. I wanted some that are a little bit, you know, a little bit more feasible for your average player to get through. And so that's what Ishan ended up being. Come on, Rama, get up. I know I'm not doing too well because I'm still not used to this dagger thief build. I'm probably totally like doing a terrible job.
Sean, my friend, please come back to us. We did not survive the horrors of Shirotagachi only to have your story end here.
Wait, what did she just say?
I jump around a lot because my Daredevil build relies on that to get conditions on. I think you know, I use that dodge trait where you get oh, what is it? One of the debuffs. It applies a couple debuffs whenever you dodge. So I do a lot of dodging, which probably doesn't benefit me so much in this build other than mobility, but and yes, I'm not a rotation player, as you can see too. I basically just spam whatever buttons I can reach with my fingers at the time. That's what kind of player I am. Super casual.
That's it. It's over.
Sean,
Well, I didn't get the better be quick one, but
I'm so sorry I left you to this fate.
fade to white. In the background, we're turning off all of the void effects, all the like
anomalies vanished.
weird
Must have been
anomalies,
ambient corruption from the magic in the salt spray.
and then I
Sean was
start
consumed by
turning
the
off
same
the
power
environment
that
zone so it
built this
becomes beautiful inside as it was
all of
outside.
Syria.
It's super
The
fun.
void.
The void?
The force that emerged from the broken dragon cycle. Which, if not stopped, will unwind reality one thread at a time.
Care to tell us how it is you know all this? And what was the magic you used? Never seen anything like it.
I have. When Aurene shielded me against Balthazar's fire. Who are you, really?
You deserve the truth.
Yeah, so that reference
once that I
there
could
about
trust you, but-
when Aurene shielded me
but I
against
had to be
Balthazar's
sure.
fire.
Super
That was we basically another copy and paste where in the fight against Balthazar in End of Path of Fire, Aurene, when she's a little dragon, would run around and she would leave these sort of like spherical balls of energy that you could pick up and give you, and it would give you the barrier. And so I thought, hey, you know, that's dragon magic. Suan and Kunavang would also have that same sort of thing. So we brought that forward into this instance as a tease
You're Sue
of
Wong's champion.
you know, what was just revealed to us, that
It's been
Navon
centuries
is
since
really
I
Kunavang.
revealed my true form to a mortal. The last time, well, that mortal was a hero.
One
much
other
like
thing,
yourself.
well, actually, first of
One
all,
who saved me from
I
a
have to,
terrible fate.
I have to just
Now time is short.
say what
But
an amazing
I'm sure you
job
have questions.
our creature art team did on Kunavang. I am especially in love with the shader that makes her skin, her scales look iridescent. I could spend hours looking at this amazingly beautiful model with this beautiful, you know, color shifting on her scales. She looks very, very magical and beautiful. What was I gonna say? I don't know. Couldn't have been that important, I guess. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, I may be the only one, but like when I first got hold of the story beats in a spreadsheet, I was like, wait, Navon, is that Kunavang? And everyone was like, how did you know? And I was like, well, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? Navon, Kunavang. But apparently nobody else bumped on it, and I initially thought, oh, this is too obvious, we should change her name, right? But I think a lot of people didn't catch on to that. I don't know why it stuck out to me. It just did. So maybe some of you also were like, oh, it was obvious, but I found that I was one of the few people who really got it, and a lot of people after the fact were like, oh, I totally see what you did there, ha ha ha. I say that not to make myself seem smarter than I am, but just to say I'm weird, and sometimes I key in on things that maybe other people wouldn't. Anyway, there's some cool optional dialogue. There's a lot of lore. Oh man, we went so deep on this. We had so many conversations about what Kunavang would say, how she would say it, how deep into the lore we would need to go, because, you know, again, this is we could spend an hour here talking to Kunavang about, you know, the void and elder dragons and all this stuff, and so we kind of boiled it down to the most sort of one of the three most important questions that we would have lore wise, and those are at the top, and then the, you know, the golden path. Hey, I just want to get to the next part of the story, so I'm just going to do that. Again, if you're interested in the lore side of it, please play it and tell me what you think, because we had a lot of fun talking about what Kunavang would say and how she would do it, and I think we did a pretty good job. Myself, I'm biased, of course, but I'm happy with where we settled on in terms of like the breadth and the depth of what she reveals here.
I don't know. She allowed herself to be contained because he was the only possible option. Without the stability provided by the other elder dragons, and with that containment chamber destroyed,
She'll be overwhelmed.
Would it help if we could find another way to siphon off some of that magic?
Using Anka's extractor.
yes, that might work. It would buy time, at least.
But it means we need to find Anka. Fast.
The Deus Ex Machinanka. Ha ha ha. Yeah.
Kaz, Taimi, were you listening to what Kunavang had to say?
Yes? I have so many questions.
Questions we don't have time for now. We
This
need
is one
to
of those
find
that I was
Anka.
like,
She
we
didn't leave
kind
us
of,
much
we
time
had
to
this
react.
moment, like I definitely was like, we have a lot of questions, and it really made sense that like, well, the commander is not gonna, you know, like,
Any insights into her personality that might help?
well, I mean, this
She
is one of those tough
successfully
times
lured
where
me
like
into an
we have to put
incredibly obvious trap.
words in the
It's fair to
commander's
say
mouth,
I don't know her at all anymore. If I ever did.
knowing that
Hello,
at the back end of
Lady
this
Navon?
we're gonna have optional
Or
conversations
Kunavang,
with
I should
with
say.
Kunavang.
I wanted to tell you about
But you know, we
Ishan.
kind of want to get you in and
Fight
out
as
of
long as
this
you
sort of
We're only
ending
alive
scene,
because of him.
so that players who
Thank
don't
you.
necessarily care about all
I
the
overheard
lore
you all
bits,
talking
and there are
and
players
think
who,
I might
you
be
know,
able to
want
help.
the express
I'm
version of
Amy,
story.
and I'm a member of the
Um,
Kestrels, which means
aren't
it's my job
bored
to
to
know
tears
everything that's going on in Echo
by
Force.
being
I need
forced to sit
escort these
through
people to Mori
dialogues.
Village.
I mean, we
We
already
can talk when we
have
get
to
back.
kind of have people sit through dialogues because we don't currently have a way for players to skip dialogue. So they have to do it anyway, but we try to keep that to a minimum, and so that's why we've been employing a lot more of these sort of like optional things where you can ask more questions after the fact. And again, I'm not going to do that here just because there's no reason to. We're talking here about game design and gameplay stuff, not necessarily story stuff. That is part of narrative design, but there's not a lot of talk about in terms of like implementation on this stuff. It's pretty much just conversations. So yeah, that's it for Chapter 8, Fallout. I did not talk about Ayumi. Ayumi is a cool new character that we introduced here. She's got an amazing model. I am so in love with all the new Tengu that we got for End of Dragons. They are just phenomenal, and I'm hoping that we get to use more Tengu and revisit with some Tengu in future installments of Guild Wars 2. So that is it, though, for this chapter. We're going to move on to Chapter 9, To Catch a Spider, and I will pick up with you again next time. All right. Thank you all for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you soon, and we will play through Chapter 9. All right. Thanks, and I will see you soon.